Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. It is me, Kay, and I'm here today to review Beyond the Gate Season 2, Episodes 126 and 127. So this is kind of me catching up because I got a tad bit behind on my reviews. So I'm going to combine these two reviews. So I'm just going to hit just a few points from each episode and then maybe, elaborate on some parts that stuck out to me. And then I'll have you up out of here. I won't hold you long. Okay, so basically, we start out seeing Smitty at Orphe Jeans, okay? As we know, Smitty is still, working on his multi-story piece for the newspaper he works for. And so he's, looking at some things, but then he's also having flashbacks because, of course, what his boss said is, playing in his mind. And so she asked him, if you don't recall last time, she asked him if it would be a problem with him being the spouse of a politician, and will that, interfere with the stories that he's telling or the articles that he, needs to write, or will, will he keep them in the dark about some things that's happening politically? Like, she doesn't want him being in a relationship with a politician to become a conflict of interest. So he's been having flashbacks of, the times with him and Martin, right? And as you know, him and Martin went through that rough patch where Martin was hiding the fact that, he went through that situation with racism, that him and Vernon went through, and then it accidentally, turned into him taking another man's life and him seriously injuring another man. And so that really broke a lot of trust in a relationship for them. And so Smitty is, reflecting on that. And then it's just the fact that they are in a better place, but I guess, both him and Martin reflect on what exactly occurred, and how they were able to recover from those incidents. While Smitty is at Orphe Jeans, Andre runs into him, and so him and Andre sit down and have a powwow about love and relationships. And, Smitty gives Andre some words of wisdom, as a person who was in a long-term relationship, a committed relationship. And then, Andre, they're having a conversation. So Andre gives him feedback on, what's going on with him and Danny, and, how he expects for, or what he imagines to happen in his relationship. And so all in all, I'm just, my heart hurts for Andre because, there's this big secret that we all know, but Andre doesn't know yet. And so it's just, it makes you put into perspective, how do you think Andre will react to this once he finds out? And so the same thing happens on, Martin's behalf. Andre ends up, running into Martin because Martin reaches out to Andre, right? And so Andre was telling Martin how he ran into Smitty and how, Smitty is such a good guy for him. And, they talk about relationships and how, their relationship has been tested, but they grew from it. Excuse me. How they grew from it. And, Martin just says, I won't go through everything that happened, but, as cousins, and since you're family, I'll just, give you the gist. And then he says whatever to Andre. Andre was like, I hear you or whatever, and I receive what you said, but, this is what's going on or whatever like that. And so basically, between the two conversations, we see and understand, and I think it has happened over the course of a couple episodes that, Danny, for Andre, is the first real person that he has gotten into a relationship with where he was totally and completely vulnerable. And us finding this part out is hurtful for me to watch, because I know that a heartbreak or, a serious test in their relationship is coming. And watching Danny beat herself up about it, but then, she talks junk about Bill and Ted. I'm just like, girl, you can now join their club because you have done the same thing. You know what I mean? But then she keeps trying to say there's a difference. Like, she keeps trying to say, it was a lapse in judgment. You can't go through something and not be understanding or now show empathy to somebody else who else had made that same mistake. Or it's not even a mistake, because sometimes I feel like people use the word mistake. A mistake is something that just happens, you know. And for me, to me, in my opinion, an entanglement is not a mistake. There were a lot of decisions that occurred before the entanglement commenced. There was the disrobing of garments. You know, there was actions associated before the disrobing of garments. You know, and then there's the actual physical act that happens. Like, there's, you know what I mean? And so even though people say, oh, well, it just happened, sometimes I just don't believe stuff just happened. And so for Danny, even though I you know, I am empathetic towards Danny, because she is taking accountability in some aspects, but I do feel like there are some things that she is lacking. And so as we see her now talk to a second person about what has happened, you know, we see, you know, a difference in how she wants to move forward or goes about it, or, you know, just decisions that she wants to make forward. But I know I done got kind of ahead of myself. But in terms of like just what we're seeing with Andre, Danny is the first person he has gotten vulnerable with. And so he is saying that since his parents died, he spent all a while not getting close to people because he did not want to experience them leaving or hurt or grief in a certain matter again. And this is also why we see him being adamantly on Danny, on her taking preventative cautions or measures in terms of her health, because he doesn't want to experience that again, or he wants to be able to manage it better, if that makes sense, at least to me and in my interpretation, you know. But it's just, you know, with Martin, we're seeing Martin, you know, try to be more honest with Smitty, and, you know, making more time for Smitty, and, you know, prioritizing their family and spending time with each other first, instead of just, you know, being so career driven like it was in the past. Also, we see Naomi have a conversation with Martin, Chelsea, and Kat. And I really enjoyed this moment just because we don't get moments where the cousins, just like the cousin core, is together. And as close as Danny is to Nicole, we see that Chelsea and Kat are extremely close. We've even been seeing more of the dynamic between Naomi and Chelsea. You know, we get Kat and Martin here and there, but just the core four of them, and just to see how, you know, things that go on their parents' lives directly affect them, and then they got a lot of comment. I need that more. I need that more on the show. I think it's important, because the same way, you know, we see Danny and Nicole and Anita and Vernon have like those breakfasts, I would like to see them have those more, because, you know, there's certain things that they can talk to and they can vent to each other about, because one, they're cousins, they're near siblings, because y'all know how that goes in Black families, where your cousins can turn into more like your siblings. And then, you know, just them being able to talk to each other and, you know, vent to each other and be able to tell their feelings to each other, you know, like being more like bestie cousins, like the same way like how Kat and Chelsea are. I'm not saying, you know, everybody has to be like that, of course, but I'm just saying in terms of like this family, since this family is portrayed to us to be so close knit, you know what I mean? I would like to see more of that with those four. Loved it. Of course, we have Naomi telling them about her testing positive for the BRCA mutation. I thought it was interesting. After the situation with Kat and Eva, Kat because Kat went through that situation and she knows how she felt when people were berating her about giving a piece of her liver to Eva. I like the fact that from her perspective, she just wanted to sit and listen to Naomi. I thought that was like great. She was more understanding. She wasn't as judgmental. She was slow to speak and very quick to listen. Martin learning from what he did to Kat and giving Naomi the room to speak. Loved it. I like that. I like that that self-awareness that Martin had, because even though, the news that they heard was devastating to them, they still were able to give Naomi the space to communicate her feelings, what she felt, how she plans to move forward, X, Y, and Z. Chelsea. I totally understood Chelsea. And I'm not going to say Chelsea was wrong, because I felt like Chelsea's reaction was natural, especially to, again, a family that deems themselves close-knit. And we've seen quite a few scenes where Chelsea and Naomi have that sister time. And I just want to say, Chelsea is becoming one of my favorite characters on this show. Like, I just like how she's so gentle in her delivery. Even when she's mad. And she's the one who keeps it funky with everybody. She keeps it straight with her mom. She keeps it straight with Madison. And she's even willing to take, that she was wrong. She's able to accept other people's feelings when they are in disagreement with her. So, again, even in this conversation that Chelsea is having with Naomi, I feel like it was totally valid, because if you're as close with your sister, and you feel like, I'm able to go to my sister about everything. And as we know, a lot of people, or not a lot of people, but to me, or it has been my experience or my interpretation, sometimes with sisters could be like this, where they're dang near fused. Their bones are fused at the hip. They move in one body, one mind, one sound. You know what I mean? And then there's some relationship with sisters where they can't stand each other. It's hatred, and they don't even like to be in each other's presence. But in this situation, especially with Naomi being the older sister and then Chelsea being the younger sister, and how, a lot of the times the younger sister looks up to the older sister and, kind of maybe even sits her on a pedestal and reveres her, and he wants to emulate her, be like her, and develop that closeness, that relationship. And I feel like that is what Chelsea was displaying. I don't feel more so like it was judgment, but more so hurt. Like, dang, this major event happened in your life. I can see you not reaching out to anybody else in the family, but you blocked me out. So she was mostly hurt about the situation. And then it's the fact that this is serious. You know what I'm saying? This is something that has already affected their family. And, with it being her sister, this is potentially can become something else. You know what I mean? Where it affects more than just Naomi. And sometimes I feel like with Naomi, which is fair, everybody has their opportunities to be selfish, and I do understand that, and people wants to deal with things the way they do. I do understand that, but sometimes I do feel like with Naomi only really considers herself in a lot of decisions, and she don't consider, or she maybe not be as mindful, but she's working on it though. She's working on it. You know what I mean? She's trying to be more inclusive with her family, because she know her family is not going to receive this news well, especially with how late they are getting the news. You know what I mean? And right now she has told Danny, she's now telling her cousins, and she told Jacob. I'm interested to see how Bill and Anita will react to this news, because this is something like, oh my God, Naomi, how could you not tell somebody, because she was struggling for months by herself, but also she was willfully struggling. You know what I mean? Because she said she didn't want to put pressure on, or she didn't want to worry the family with something else. You know what I mean? So even though, I don't know, I go back and forth with it because like, it's like I understand, but also I feel like that comes from a place of pride a little bit. And, like a lot of times when people think of pride, they think of a boastful, like, type thing. But sometimes pride is rooted, just in the centering of yourself. And I'm not saying it's not good to center yourself sometimes, because I think sometimes you do need to treat yourself as a priority, because if you don't, then if you don't treat yourself well, you're not going to treat others well. You know what I mean? But at the same time, it's just like when you center yourself and make such big decisions by yourself that will affect other people, it kind of, I don't know. It's just going differently. You know what I mean? I feel like with Anita received the news. She didn't really center herself. She wanted her family to be around because she knew that this would greatly impact her family. And not to say that it's not going, not to say that the situation with Danny and them didn't, but you see how as a family they rallied around Danny, they rallied around Anita, you know what I'm saying? They made sure that they were there for each other to create space for them to be there to support. And it's just, with the decision that Naomi has made, it has taken away some extent of her family being able to be there and support. And I kind of feel like it has been the same way for Jacob. Actually, I know I said I was going to do both episodes in this, but this is getting long. And obviously, I had more to say than I thought. So, I'm going to make 127 separate. But, yeah. And I mean, like I said, I'm trying to give, because I know a lot of time, I feel like most times when I do these things, I be tugging at Naomi wig because of her behavior. But it's just, looking at a person make decisions on screen, and then you kind of want to put yourself in a person's shoes and say, well, how would I react in this situation? You know what I mean? But either way, and it's the same thing, which is why Danny was just like, when Danny heard the news, she was already kind of in Naomi's shoes. She's married, she got a spouse, she got this variant, she had to tell him, give him space for him to communicate how he felt, listen to him on how he feels about how she thinks she should move forward, all those things. So, you know what I'm saying? But Chelsea, specifically speaking, because I know I probably went all around the world, specifically speaking in this matter with Chelsea being there and hearing it, Chelsea was communicating her hurt. And then, it was Kat sitting there saying, we don't want to, we want to give her space to say. And then, Chelsea did come back around, was just like, well, I understand. I'm glad you finally said something. But when Chelsea found out that she didn't tell Jacob initially either, she was just like, so you did all this and you didn't tell your husband? I appreciated that, because I was just like, that's if you didn't tell nobody else, you should have told Jacob first. Just like she went and had a talk with her mom. I felt like that was kind of out of order, in my opinion. Because I feel like when you get married, it's just you and your spouse. You know what I mean? Not to say your family's not included, but your spouse is the priority, and then your family. And so I was just like, I just feel differently, you know what I'm saying? Especially, even with looking at over the past couple of days, with how she was on Bill. You know what I mean? Taking care of himself, making sure he stayed in the hospital, make sure he get tested, make sure he's communicating, making sure, Haley is there. All this stuff, you know what I'm saying? It's a lot. It's a lot of factors. It's a lot of factors that play into all of these things. So I'm just saying, and I like the mirroring of situations. You know what I'm saying? I like when people are able to mirror the situations and see, well, you did this in this situation, and then this is what you did in this situation, but you got on me. You know what I'm saying? I'm going off on a tangent, but y'all, that's what I'm saying. Look, thankfully, overall, I'm glad that the cousins were there to support each other. And I'm glad that they were able to talk it out, and Naomi is able to free herself. You know what I'm saying? She's been holding this in for months. I'm glad she's able to have that village that she knew was always there. And she came to them and told them on her terms. And so I'm glad that she was able to, do that and be receptive to any questions that they had. With finding out the news, because them finding out the news so late, I guess she maybe was prepared for them she was prepared to be bombarded with questions because she knew that they would have questions. So, y'all know I'm trying, because Vanessa is another person who I be tugging in her week too. But I have to always remind myself that even with all the trifling things Vanessa did throughout the show so far, we know something. We, being the audience, know something that Vanessa doesn't know. So this is the small percentage of grace that I am extending to Vanessa outside of all the other trifling things that she may have done. But she is yet sitting here having this dinner. This is a continuation of the dinner with Joey, Vanessa, and Deanna. And so Deanna kept her cool. And I was worried about her because I'm just like, girl, you know what I mean? And so the dinner ended, you know what I'm saying? I thought that she was going to bust Joey at the table because, I think there's a piece of me that believes that Deanna knows about this letter. Or she may have even planted the letter in that box. I don't know. She was trying to get her mother to find it, but apparently she doesn't know yet that Joey has found it. Or, if she even knows about the letter. But anyway, the letter happened. The dinner is over with. She was like, Mom, I'm going to meet you back at the house for us to talk to Darnell. Joey pays for the dinner. He gets her dessert. Deanna gets mad. She goes outside. She steps on the food and kicks the bag. But she did all that after the fact. But it's just the fact that, Joey is really, on her case. He really knows, or he really has this strong feeling that Deanna is being disingenuous, which we know she is. But he knows that she's plotting. She's scheming. She has devised a plan. And he said he will not be a victim of her plotting. He said he got to stay 2 steps ahead of the game because he has to keep up this. It's not even a facade. He's in too deep, to me, in my opinion. Joey has gotten in too deep because now he is in an intense relationship with this woman, and it's been almost a year. It's been almost a year. So it's just like, okay. And Vanessa is all in. And he is all in on certain aspects. But then in other aspects, he keeps her at a distance. So he has to keep up this facade because he can't be found out. Because ain't no telling if Vanessa finds out about what Joey did or everything that has transpired over the last year, what she would do. I truly think that would be her break. I do. And am I interested to see if she breaks? Yes, I am. Because I feel like Joey needs to, reparations, justice needs to be served. I don't even like using the word reparations. Justice. There needs to be a repayment, an atonement. Joey needs to be held accountable for the actions that he has committed. Lastly, we see this conversation with Pam and Danny. This is the last thing I want to talk about from this episode. There's this conversation where, and by golly, Miss Molly, I've been wondering, I've been inquiring where Pam has been. Because to me, if I know ain't nobody, I know Nicole will get it done. And I know Anita will get it done. I know Naomi and Chelsea will get it done. I know Andrea will get it done. But if it's nobody else that will get Danny told and, get her together the way she need to be, Pam gonna do it. And Danny respects Pam because a couple episodes ago, Danny stated out of her mouth that she respects Pamela so much because in a career where people could have easily taken advantage of her, Pamela advocated for her. Pamela had her back. Pamela made sure she was always good and nothing ever went down without her knowing. And so now that Pamela has shown up and made her presence known, Pamela can sense that something is going on with Danny. And so she says something to Danny and Danny just comes clean. And it's amazing how night and day it is between the conversation Danny had with Vanessa and then the conversation Danny had with Pamela. This is why the Bible says, seek wise counsel. Don't listen to idiots. It don't say that verbatim, but it says do not seek unwise counsel. Vanessa was unwise counsel. Girl, do not talk to her because Vanessa told her everything to do wrong. She told her to entangle with Bill again and make sure the feelings was real, knowing that Danny is married and Danny already has a regard for Andre. She told her to just hide it, keep it, lie, don't say nothing, take it to her grave. That's not the honorable thing to do. And then 3, she telling her all this, speaking from experience. Girl, your situation with Joey is raggedy. Ain't nobody trying to be in no situation like you. And girl, you was just in a marriage that your husband just died and you already, right after the funeral, during the funeral, before the funeral, had a new boyfriend while your husband was still in Atlanta living. And then you had many side quests, many adulterous acts that were committed on your behalf. So this is Danny, unwise counsel. Unwise counsel. Now, Pam, on the other end, was very, to me, stern with her communication. Not stern, but very direct. Very direct with her communication toward Danny. Gave Danny the space to communicate how she felt. Gave Danny, feedback to the things that she was saying. And in a very truthful and direct way. And, sometimes when you talk to your homegirls, you got your homegirls where they would just give it to you real and raw, straight, no chaser. Then you have your homegirls that will give it to you direct, but give you sugar around your rim. And I feel like Pam was very direct, very straight, gave her feedback and, not condemnation, but correction. Correction. Gave her correction, because Danny is she is getting eaten alive. That guilt is eating her alive. And I feel like Pam coddled her in places where she needed to be coddled because, of course, she's feeling guilty. You never want anybody to go through such an internal battle with themselves where they're like crumbling internally and sinking into like a sadness or depression or just, like a total guilt trip or, viewing themselves in a terrible way, but also being able to give her the real and raw, unfiltered truth and let her know that I'm not telling you this in judgment because, you made a mistake. You have acknowledged what you did, but now how are we going to fix this moving forward? I needed Pamela around in the beginning. But yeah, I think that's all I have to say about episode 126. Stay tuned because episode 127 will be next. Deuces.